Have you ever taken your final, agonizing breath in a freezing, damp concrete room, entirely alone in the dark, while the family you spent 12 years protecting drank champagne on a live television broadcast? Celebrating the man who put you there? I did. My name is Arthur Vance, and before I woke up with a second chance at life, I died like a discarded piece of corporate machinery. It was November 17th, at exactly 11:42 p.m. The ambient temperature inside the unheated stone outbuilding at the edge of the family estate was 4 degrees. My hands were so swollen from the cold that I could barely type, but I was forcing my fingers across the mechanical keyboard, trying desperately to patch a critical infrastructure error in the Vance Logistics server cluster. 300 of our heavy freight trucks were stranded at the border checkpoints in Calais, their automated customs clearance manifests throwing a fatal database exception. My brother Leo, the CEO, was at the annual Midlands Business Awards Gala across town. He had just walked onto the grand stage under the blinding golden lights, accepting the trophy for Entrepreneur of the Year. I could hear his voice echoing from the small and cracked tablet screen on my desk, talking about his visionary leadership, his tireless dedication, and his brilliant strategic mind. When my chest suddenly tightened, a blinding spike of agony ripping through my left arm, I reached for my phone with a trembling, desperate hand. I called Leo first. He rejected the call within 2 seconds. I called my mother. Her assistant answered, whispering that they couldn't talk because Leo was giving his acceptance speech. I tried to speak. I tried to tell her that the chest pains were locking my lungs, but she simply whispered, "Arthur, don't be dramatic. Just fix the servers." Leo is trending on Twitter. Then the line went dead. My phone slipped from my numb fingers, cracking against the cold stone floor, as my vision began to narrow into a dark, suffocating tunnel. The last sound I heard was the distant, recorded applause of 300 wealthy executives, cheering for the brother who had built his entire reputation on the bones of my invisible labor. There was no bright white light. There was no peaceful, celestial music or grand philosophical realization. Death tasted like copper, old iron, and the freezing or stale air of an unventilated basement. I felt my heart take one final, uncoordinated, violent shudder against my ribs, and then the world went entirely black. But the darkness didn't last. Suddenly, a massive, terrifying rush of oxygen slammed into my lungs, forcing me to gasp so hard that my throat burned with a sharp, icy, raw pain. My eyes flew open. I expected to see the white tile ceiling of a municipal morgue, or the cold steel of a hospital gurney. Instead, my eyes focused on the flickering, amber glow of a dual-monitor desktop setup. The mechanical keyboard in front of me was buzzing with a familiar, warm, electrical hum. The heavy, rhythmic sound of November rain was drumming violently against a slate roof above my head. I sat up straight, my hands flying to my chest, searching for the scar, searching for the pain. My heart was beating with a steady, powerful, completely normal cadence. My fingers weren't swollen. My joints didn't ache with the chronic exhaustion of 32 years of neglect. I grabbed the edge of the wooden desk, my mind spinning in an absolute, dizzying vortex of confusion. I looked at the digital clock in the bottom right corner of the primary monitor screen. It read, November 17th, 10:15 a.m. I stared at the numbers, my breath hitching in my throat. I checked the year. It wasn't the year I died. The system calendar was showing exactly 365 days prior. The universe hadn't just saved me. It had sent me back. I was standing exactly 1 year before my death, on the very morning before the catastrophic continental shipping contract integration, and precisely 24 hours before my father would rewrite his final will and testament. It took me exactly 14 minutes of intense, systematic data validation to confirm that I wasn't insane. I checked the global financial markets, the live news feeds, the internal code commits on our server. Everything was aligned. I possessed a complete, detailed, chronological memory map of the next 12 months of our family's history. I knew every corporate alliance Leo would fake. I knew every penny my mother would spend from the reserve accounts to fund his lavish lifestyle. And most importantly, I knew the exact day my father's heart would fail him in his sleep. In my past life, I would have used this knowledge to warn them. I would have run across the courtyard to the main corporate villa, begged my father to get a cardiovascular screening, and begged Leo to fix the database architecture before the Calais contracts collapsed. But as I sat there, looking at my reflection in the dark glass of the monitor, I remembered the cold, dismissive texture of my mother's voice over the phone while I was dying. "Arthur, don't be dramatic. Leo is trending on Twitter." A strange, deep, absolute coldness settled over my soul. It wasn't anger. Anger is a volatile, inefficient emotion that distorts a programmer's logic. It was something far more dangerous. It was absolute clarity. I realized that my family didn't suffer from a lack of information. They suffered from a profound, incurable disease of arrogance. They truly believed that because they held the titles, they held the power. They looked at my silence, my isolation, and my compliance as proof of my inferiority. They didn't understand that the quietest component in a machine is often the only one preventing the engine from exploding. I stood up, walked to the small stone window, and looked across the manicured lawns toward the main mansion. I made a silent, solemn vow to the universe. I will not warn them. I will not save them. I will move in absolute, perfect, impenetrable silence. And when the timeline catches up to the night I died, they will find out exactly what it costs to live in a world without Arthur Vance. To understand the depth of their arrogance, you have to understand the dynamic between Leo and me. We were identical twins, but my mother treated us like two entirely different species of animal. Leo was the alpha, the golden boy, the face of the Vance family legacy. He had inherited my father's commanding, boisterous, deep voice, and my mother's striking, symmetrical, theatrical facial features. He could walk into a room of hardened, cynical venture capitalists, and within 10 minutes, have them signing multi-million-dollar investment mandates on napkins. I, on the other hand, was born with a severe vocal cord restriction that required 2 surgeries before I was 5. It left my voice soft, quiet, and lacking any sort of dramatic authority. Because I couldn't command a room with a shout, my family assumed I had nothing to say. When we were 14, Leo crashed my father's brand new Mercedes into the estate gates while driving illegally. My mother hired an expensive private security firm to cover it up, and then spent the next 3 weeks telling our relatives that Leo showed incredible leadership and initiative under stress. That same year, I spent 4 months designing an end-to-end automated inventory database for my school's entire library network, saving them thousands of pounds in operational overhead. When I presented the completion certificate to my father at the dinner table, he checked his watch, handed it back without reading it, and asked me if my little computer games were going to interfere with my weekend chore of painted the stables. I realized then that visibility in our household was a currency, and Leo held a complete, violent monopoly over it. So, I stopped begging for their currency. I began investing every single ounce of my cognitive energy into a currency they couldn't understand. The absolute, unyielding, beautiful logic of automated systems architecture. By the time 2025 arrived, Vance Logistics had grown from a regional shipping company into a national freight giant. On paper, Leo was the mastermind behind this exponential expansion. The trade magazines called him the digital visionary of the logistics corridor. But the real reason our trucks never lost money was a closed-source software stack called Janus. I wrote Janus in 2018, sitting in this exact stone outbuilding, working through freezing winter nights with an electric heater wrapped around my feet. Janus was a highly sophisticated, proprietary automation kernel written in native C++. It did things that standard commercial software packages couldn't dream of. It linked directly to the European Union's customs API terminals, parsed transit data in real time, predicted border checkpoint delays using satellite weather feeds, and automatically recalculated delivery routes for our 300 trucks every 60 seconds. If a bridge was closed in Belgium, Janus knew it 40 minutes before the local authorities announced it, and rerouted our fleet through alternative country lanes, saving millions in fuel and port storage penalties. Leo didn't even know how to install the software. He thought it ran on magic, or that the computers in the corporate office were just naturally superior. Every time he sat in a board meeting with international clients, he would open my real-time Janus Analytics dashboard on his tablet, point at the climbing profit graphs, and say, "As you can see, my strategic digital framework has optimized our operational footprint." I let him say it. For 8 years, I let him wear my crown. I thought that as long as my father was alive, the truth would eventually surface in the corporate structure. But now, with the gift of future memory, I knew the exact date the truth would be permanently buried. Tomorrow morning, my father would enter the lawyer's office to sign his final will. In my previous life, I received nothing but an acre of swamp and a stone room. This time, I wasn't going to try to change the will. I was going to change the entire definition of the asset. If you have ever been the invisible backbone of a company, a family, or a relationship, while someone else took the money, the applause, and the credit, you need to subscribe to Anonymous Archives right now. Leave a comment below and tell me if you have ever reached that absolute breaking point, where you realize that the only way to make toxic people understand your value is to let them experience the weight of your complete absence. Because what my twin brother Leo and my mother found out 60 days after my father's death isn't just a basic story about professional retaliation. It is a cold, brutal surgical demonstration of what happens to a multi-million-dollar corporate castle. When the quiet person holding up the foundation finally decides to step away, the clock read 11:15 a.m. on November 17th. I had exactly 24 hours before the legal machinery of my family's estate began to lock into place. I didn't waste a single second. I opened an encrypted browser terminal and initiated an offshore corporate creation protocol. In my past life, I had left the intellectual property rights of the Janus software kernel floating in a legal gray area. I had written it using company hardware, but completely outside of working hours, without an official employment contract. Leo's legal team had used that gray area to claim the software belonged to Vance Logistics under implied corporate creation. This time, I wasn't going to leave a single loophole for their expensive city lawyers to exploit. I accessed the Registry of Commerce in Delaware through a secure, private VPN node. Within 40 minutes, I incorporated an independent data infrastructure firm called Janus Sovereignty Systems LLC. I appointed an international corporate trustee service to manage the public filings, ensuring my name appeared nowhere on the public registry. Then, I drafted a formal, ironclad software licensing agreement between Janus Sovereignty Systems LLC and myself as an individual creator. I legally assigned the exclusive, universal copyright of the Janus source code to my new shell company for a period of 99 years. Next, I opened the source code files on my server. I compiled the master kernel, but I added a tiny, invisible layer of security validation. I inserted an encrypted time lock token deep within the core routing module. This token required a dynamic, digital cryptographic key validation from an external, off-site server every 30 days. If the master server failed to receive the dynamic token refresh, the software wouldn't crash maliciously. It would simply withdraw its authorization certificates, reverting the corporate office terminals into empty, non-functional software shells that couldn't communicate with the European ports. I wasn't stealing their data. I was simply preparing to withdraw my private property. Next, I needed to secure the physical ground beneath their feet, and my future memory had given me the exact coordinate map of their greatest vulnerability. At 2:00 in the afternoon, I put on a thick, waterproof coat and walked out into the pouring rain. I didn't take the main paved path toward the corporate office villa. I walked south, tracing the boundary line where our family estate met the old, dilapidated pastures of a retired dairy farmer named Arthur Pendleton. For 32 years, our family trucks had used a heavy-duty asphalt access road to exit the primary loading depot and reach the M42 highway. This road was the literal throat of Vance Logistics. If that road was closed, our trucks would be trapped inside the depot yard, unable to exit, because the northern boundary of the property was completely blocked by a protected ancient woodland grid. In my past life, during the reading of the will, my father revealed that he had legally split the northern acre from the rest of the company holdings. He thought he was giving me a worthless, soggy patch of marshland to keep me quiet, but he had relied on an old, outdated survey map from 1984. What he didn't realize, and what Leo's corporate surveyors had missed, was that when the local county council expanded the drainage ditches in 2012, the actual physical boundary line of the northern acre had shifted by exactly 12 meters to the south. This meant that the final, critical junction of the asphalt access road, the exact point where the trucks turned left to climb the ramp onto the public highway, sat squarely inside the legal territory of the northern acre. In my past life, I had found this detail out 6 months after the funeral, and I had stupidly told Leo about it, believing he would appreciate my due diligence. He had responded by ordering his legal team to file an adverse possession claim, stealing the road territory from me through a court technicality while calling me an ungrateful leech. This time, I wasn't going to mention the survey error to anyone. I walked directly over to Old Man Pendleton's cottage. Holding a manila folder filled with cash and a pre-drafted legal lease agreement, Arthur Pendleton was 84 years old, his joints twisted by arthritis, and he wanted nothing more than to sell his land and move closer to his daughter in Wales. He sat across from me in his damp kitchen, his old dog sleeping by the stove, looking at the lease agreement I had laid out on the table. I didn't try to buy his entire farm. I only asked for a 25-year exclusive environmental management lease over the specific strip of land that bordered the southern edge of my family's marshland plot. I offered him £25,000 in cash, right there on the spot, an amount that represented almost my entire personal savings from 8 years of development work. It was more money than that barren strip of land would produce in a century. He looked at the cash, then looked at me, his old eyes squinting with confusion. "Arthur, boy, why do you want this mud? It's nothing but brambles and badger holes." I gave him a soft, perfectly calm smile and said, "I am interested in local biodiversity conservation. Mr. Pendleton, I want to ensure the natural habitats aren't disturbed by the heavy industrial traffic next door." He chuckled, shook his rough, calloused hand, and signed the contract. By 4 p.m., the document was scanned, uploaded, and officially registered with the UK Land Registry database through my offshore company. I now held absolute, exclusive, untouchable legal control over the land surrounding that road junction. But I didn't stop there. Using my future knowledge, I contacted the regional director of the Midlands Wildlife Conservation Trust via an anonymous corporate email address. I informed them that as the primary leaseholder of the Pendleton boundary, I was officially designating the territory as a protected wildlife hedge corridor, specifically designed to protect the endangered European badger populations that traveled between the ancient northern woods and the southern streams. The trust accepted the designation within 2 hours, logging it into the official governmental environmental registry. Under British federal law, once a territory is registered as an active wildlife corridor, any commercial industrial entity that causes structural damage or heavy acoustic disturbance to that grid faces immediate, automatic criminal injunctions from the High Court. Leo thought he was inheriting an untouchable industrial empire. He had no idea that I had just transformed his primary commercial exit road into a legal, environmental landmine. On the morning of November 18th, I walked into the main mansion's breakfast room. My father was sitting at the head of the long oak table, drinking black coffee, his face pale and strained from the early stages of the heart disease that would take his life in 12 months. My mother was buttering toast with elegant, sharp, precise movements, while Leo stood by the window, loudly dictating a text message to his administrative assistant about his upcoming profile in the business journal. When I entered, the room went completely quiet. The kind of heavy, awkward silence that occurs when an unwanted servant enters a private dining hall. My father didn't look up from his financial papers. He simply said, "Arthur, the server in the main office is throwing a sync delay. Make sure it's sorted before the afternoon clients arrive." I didn't remind him that the sync delay was caused by Leo's marketing department downloading massive, uncompressed video files onto the secure transit network. I didn't complain about the fact that I had spent the entire night coding the Delaware offshore registry structures. I simply pulled a plastic chair to the corner of the room, sat down, and said in my soft, restricted voice, "I will check the data packets immediately. Father." Leo turned away from the window, a patronizing, wide smile stretching across his handsome face. He walked over, tapped me roughly on the shoulder, and said, "That's a good lad. Arthur, keep the pipes clean. I've got the managing director of the European Freight Alliance coming down next month, and I need the system looking perfect for my presentation. Can't have your little tech glitches ruining our expansion, right?" My mother smiled elegantly, nodding her agreement. "Your brother is doing magnificent work. Arthur, we all have our roles to play." I looked up into Leo's bright, arrogant eyes, and for a split second, I saw the image of him standing on that gala stage, refusing my phone call while I choked to death in the cold stone room. I didn't flinch. I didn't show a single ounce of resentment. I gave him a slow, submissive nod. "Of course. Leo, I will ensure the system performs exactly as you deserve." He laughed, completely satisfied with my compliance, and went back to his phone. They thought they were looking at a beaten dog. They didn't realize they were looking at the technician who was quietly disconnecting the fuse from their explosives. At exactly 11 o'clock that morning, Mr. Abernathy, the senior legal partner, arrived at the estate with his leather briefcase. My father, my mother, and Leo went into the private study, closing the heavy mahogany doors behind them. In my past life, I had stood outside those doors for 2 hours, my heart pounding with anxiety, feeling a deep, burning sense of humiliation because I had been excluded from the family financial meeting. This time, I didn't stand outside the door. I sat calmly in my stone outbuilding, watching a live data stream from the hidden, voice-activated microphone I had installed inside the study's desk lamp 6 months prior. Through my headphones, I listened to my mother's voice, sharp and calculating, as she spoke to the lawyer. Mr. Abernathy, we need to ensure the corporate voting shares are concentrated entirely in Leo's hands. Arthur simply does not have the emotional stability or the public presence to manage an industrial asset of this scale. My father sighed, a heavy, raspy sound. Arthur's a good technician, but he's passive. He's content with his computers. If we split the shares, Leo will be constantly fighting him for operational control. Leo's voice came through the line, smooth, dripping with artificial concern. I want to take care of Arthur. Father. Truly. But he doesn't understand the market. If we give him the northern marshland acre and the outbuilding, he'll have his own private sanctuary. He won't have to deal with the pressure of the commercial world. It's what he actually wants. The lawyer asked, and what about the corporate revenue streams? Should we allocate a legacy dividend for Arthur? My mother answered instantly, no. That's completely unnecessary. Leo will manage the family wealth and provide Arthur with a monthly accommodation stipend as he sees fit. It will keep things simple. I listened to them systematically strip me of my birthright, my inheritance, and my financial security, treating me like a simple-minded dependent who needed to be locked in a cage for his own protection. I didn't feel a single drop of sadness. I pulled up my terminal and coded a new command into the Janus master server stack. If they were going to give me nothing but the stone outbuilding and the mud, then the stone outbuilding and the mud would become the most expensive piece of real estate on the planet. If you've ever had your own family, your own friends, or your own business partners, look you dead in the eye and treat your silence as a weakness. You need to stay with this story and subscribe to Anonymous Archives right now. Write "Silence is Power" in the comments section below. If you understand the absolute strategic value of letting your enemies believe they have completely defeated you, right before you pull the legal trapdoor beneath their feet. Because what Arthur Vance did over the next 9 months of his second chance is the perfect blueprint for anyone who has ever been forced to wear the label of the worthless child, while carrying the entire weight of the family's world on their shoulders. For the next 9 months, I lived like a complete ghost inside my own family. I woke up at 5 a.m. every morning, cleared the server logs, and spent 12 hours expanding the capabilities of the Janus software stack. To Leo and my mother, I appeared completely broken, completely submissive to my fate. When Leo secured the massive, multi-million-pound European Freight Alliance contract in March, a deal that would increase our truck volume by 150%, he held a grand press conference in the main depot yard. The television cameras were everywhere, their lenses reflecting the glossy green paint of our new fleet of Scania trailers. Leo stood at the podium, wearing his tailored suit, talking about how his integrated digital optimization platform would ensure that our trucks would cross the border into Europe without a single minute of regulatory delay. He didn't mention that the entire integration was being handled by a single, exhausted man, sitting 50 yards away in an unheated stone outbuilding, writing thousands of lines of API validation script. During the celebration dinner that evening, my mother handed Leo a set of diamond cufflinks that had belonged to my grandfather. She looked at me, sitting at the far end of the table in my plain sweater, and said, "Arthur, try to look a bit more cheerful for your brother. His success ensures you'll always have a roof over your head." I held my wine glass up, looked directly into her cold, elegant face, and said, "I am profoundly aware of exactly what Leo's success is built on. Mother." Leo laughed loudly, clinking his glass against mine. "That's the spirit. Arthur, don't worry. When we open the new terminal in Rotterdam, I'll buy you a brand new monitor for your little room." I smiled, took a slow sip of my water, and checked my internal calendar. According to my future memory, my father had exactly 72 days left to live, and the trap I was setting for his company was now completely airtight. Script, paste into CapCut exactly as written. In June, 2 months before my father's projected cardiac event, I initiated the final technical phase of my plan. I didn't change the software code on the office computers, but I altered the routing network architecture. I moved the primary database cluster of the Janus operating system off the local Vance Logistics hardware and uploaded it onto an unlisted, secure cloud server network hosted in Zurich, owned entirely by my Delaware shell firm, Janus Sovereignty Systems LLC. I then set up an automated billing registry within the server's core operating framework. For the last 8 years, Vance Logistics had been using my software without a formal written contract. I drafted an official, digital, automated end-user license agreement, embedded directly into the boot sequence of the office terminals. On the first day of every month, the corporate terminal system had to ping the Zurich server, automatically accepting the terms of service to keep the software active. The terms were standard for commercial logistics software, except for one tiny, hidden clause in paragraph 97. The clause stated that the user license was strictly non-transferable and could be revoked instantly without prior notice if the majority ownership of the client company shifted, or if the primary author of the software kernel was removed from his physical operational location. Leo's IT department never read the digital terms of service. Every month, the network administrator simply clicked "I accept" on the administrative pop-up screen, assuming it was just a routine security update from Microsoft or Linux. They were literally signing the death warrant of their own operational access, clicking their mouse buttons to confirm that their entire business strategy was completely dependent on my permission. History is an absolute, unyielding river. No matter how much you know about the future, you cannot stop the flow of time. On August 24th, at exactly 3:14 a.m., the rhythmic, heavy sound of an ambulance siren woke me from my sleep. I stood at the stone window of my outbuilding, watching the flashing blue lights reflect against the white brick facade of the main mansion. My father's heart had failed him, exactly as it had done in my previous life, down to the precise minute. I didn't run out into the driveway to scream or cry. I sat down at my desk, opened my terminal, and watched the automated network logs, even while the paramedics were wheeling my father's sheet-covered body out to the driveway. I noticed a massive spike in data traffic coming from Leo's private office computer. Through my hidden microphone network, I heard him talking to his financial director on the phone, his voice tight, cold, and frantic. "He's gone." "Yes. Lock down the bank accounts immediately. Call Abernathy and tell him we need the probate hearing finalized by the end of the month. Don't let Arthur access any of the corporate transaction logs. I don't want him looking at the shareholder registry before the will is read." I listened to my twin brother prioritize corporate cash flow over the death of his own father, working through the night to ensure his grip on the empire was completely uncontested. The next morning, my mother came down to my outbuilding, her face covered by a black lace veil, her voice trembling with artificial grief. "Arthur, your father has passed away. It's a terrible, tragic loss for our family. Leo is handling all the complex business arrangements. So please just stay out here and make sure the truck routing doesn't fail during the mourning period. We cannot afford a financial hit right now." I looked at her, seeing the complete absence of any real motherly warmth in her eyes. I gave her a soft, completely flat nod. I understand, Mother. I will stay exactly where you have put me. She patted my arm, a cold, mechanical gesture, and walked back across the yard. They truly believed that they were managing a helpless child. They didn't realize they were standing in front of the executioner. 3 days before the official probate hearing, Leo held a private meeting inside his office with Mr. Abernathy and my mother. They thought I was working in the outbuilding, completely oblivious to their actions. But my hidden microphone network recorded every single syllable of their conversation with crystal clear audio fidelity. Leo leaned forward, his leather chair creaking through the speaker. Mr. Abernathy, is the deed for the northern acre completely separate? The lawyer replied, Yes, Leo. It's an entirely isolated plot. Under the terms of your father's final directive, that acre is transferred directly to Arthur as an individual. He will have 0 shares in Vance Logistics, 0 claim on the transport fleet, and 0 access to the corporate cash reserves. My mother added, Perfect. We need to make sure he signs the acceptance papers immediately during the reading. If he suspects anything, he might try to cause trouble with the software he manages. Leo, have you talked to the IT department? Leo let out a short, arrogant laugh. Mother, the IT department told me that Arthur's script is completely automated. It's been running without a manual update for 9 months. Once Arthur signs the papers and accepts his little plot, we can change the server passwords, lock him out of the network, and let him spend the rest of his life staring at his muddy grass. He doesn't have the brains or the money to fight us in court anyway. I took off my headphones, set them down neatly on the wooden desk, and let out a long, quiet breath. The chessboard was completely set. Every single piece was exactly where it needed to be. Leo thought he was preparing a trap to eliminate me from the family history. He didn't understand that I had already built the walls of his prison, and he was currently walking inside to lock the door behind himself. On the night before the will reading, I performed my final technical asset verification protocol. I verified that the 30-day time lock token on the Zurich server was running its countdown sequence. It had exactly 24 hours left before it required a new security certificate update. If I left my outbuilding, if I disconnected my primary server cluster, the countdown would hit 0. And the security authorization for the Janus operating system would vanish globally. Next, I opened the UK Land Registry portal and confirmed that my 25-year environmental lease with Arthur Pendleton was completely active. The Midlands Wildlife Conservation Trust had already installed 2 discrete, high-definition surveillance cameras along the hedge corridor, specifically designed to monitor any industrial trespass or habitat destruction by commercial vehicles. I packed my entire life into 4 plain cardboard boxes. I didn't have much. A few technical textbooks, my digital forensics tools, my clothes, and the primary server blades. I left the rusted metal racks behind. I left the empty monitor cases on the desk. I left a single, black-jacketed, 6mm optical fiber cable hanging from the wall cavity, its copper core glinting faintly in the dark like a severed nerve string. I loaded the boxes into the back of my plain, old estate car, parked it behind the stone barn, and sat down on the floor of my empty room, waiting for the morning sun to rise. I didn't feel a single drop of fear. I didn't feel a single drop of hesitation. Precision is the absolute master of my life, and the calculation was completely, flawlessly complete. If you are waiting for the exact moment when the toxic family realizes that they have made the worst mistake of their financial lives, make sure you are subscribed to Anonymous Archives right now. Share this video with one friend who needs to see a brilliant, legal, and technological revenge plot, because we are about to enter that sterile corporate boardroom, where my mother and my brother Leo are waiting with their pens ready, completely blind to the absolute structural devastation that is about to hit their empire. The senior partner's office at Abernathy and Associates smelled exactly like it did in my past life. Polished beeswax, high-end wool suits, and the faint, synthetic scent of fresh printer toner. My mother sat on the plush leather sofa on the left side of the room, her posture perfectly straight, her face covered by her dark mourning veil, though I could see her cold, calculating eyes tracking my every movement. Leo sat right next to her, wearing an expensive black three-piece suit, a platinum watch glinting on his wrist, radiating the absolute, unshakable confidence of a man who had already won the lottery. I was given the isolated, uncomfortable plastic chair near the water cooler, sitting quietly with my cheap notebook and a wooden pencil in my lap. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat, adjusted his gold spectacles, and opened the heavy leather binder in front of him. His voice had that flat, rhythmic, completely detached drone of a professional who had spent 40 years watching wealthy families tear their own names to shreds over paper. To my firstborn son, Leo Vance, the entirety of Vance Logistics Limited, including all commercial fleets, the registered trademarks, the primary operational depot, the £5 million family estate, and all associated liquidity reserves held within the corporate treasuries. The lawyer stopped reading, his eyes flickering uncomfortably over the rim of his glasses toward me. Exactly as he had done 12 months ago in my previous life, to my second son. Arthur Vance, the single acre of protected marshland situated on the far northern boundary of the estate, and the detached stone outbuilding containing what my father had classified as the historical data archives. Leo didn't even turn his head to look at me. He just stared straight ahead at the mahogany conference table, a small, cruel, self-satisfied smirk appearing at the corner of his jaw. Mr. Abernathy looked up from his papers and asked, "Mr. Arthur Vance, do you understand the terms? Do you wish to file a formal notice to contest the disposition before we proceed to probate?" Before I could even raise my hand, my mother leaned forward, her voice dropping into that gentle, patronizing, theatrical tone she used to manage me. "Arthur, let's be entirely realistic about this situation. Leo has always had the natural mind for the big picture. He requires the full commercial infrastructure of the logistics fleet to keep our family brand secure and wealthy. You have always, bless you, preferred your quiet little computer hobbies and your private isolation. And now that stone outbuilding and the grass around it are legally yours forever. You won't have to deal with the stress of running a massive company." She spoke as if she were giving me a magnificent, generous gift, rather than confirming my complete and total dispossession from the family fortune. I opened my notebook, made a single tick mark next to the date, and closed it. I stood up from my plastic chair, walked calmly over to the mahogany desk, and signed the transfer documentation for the northern acre without a single tremor in my fingers. I shook Mr. Abernathy's hand, and then I turned to look directly into my twin brother's eyes. I said in my soft, quiet, and restricted voice, "Thank you, Mother. Thank you, Leo. I will clear my technical assets out of the building by Friday evening." Leo let out a short, mocking chuckle under his breath, tapping his platinum watch. "No need to wait until Friday. Artie, I've already had the security team change the gate codes for the main yard. We wouldn't want any confusion with the clients coming in tomorrow morning. You can take your little boxes today." I looked at him, and for a split second, a vision of his frantic, sweating face from my past life flashed through my mind. I gave him a slow, submissive nod. "Of course, Leo, today is completely perfect." They truly believed they had just completed the perfect heist. They had absolutely no idea that they had just signed a contract to lease a body without a soul. At 2 p.m., I started the engine of my old estate car and drove out of the family estate gates for the last time. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I didn't care about the grand brick house, the rolling lawns, or the silver corporate signs. I drove north, clearing the industrial sprawl of the Midlands, heading straight toward the border of Scotland. 9 months ago, I had used an anonymous corporate account to purchase a small, gray stone cottage on the isolated east coast, near Arbroath. The cottage sat on a high cliff overlooking the North Sea, surrounded by nothing but miles of cold, wet sand and low stone walls. I arrived just as the dawn was breaking over the water, the sky turning a dark, metallic, icy shade of gray. The air there smelled of salt, old iron, and cold, wet earth. Within 4 hours, I had unpacked my 4 boxes, mounted my primary server blades onto a small desktop rack in the spare bedroom, and connected my terminal to a private, high-speed satellite internet node. I launched my new independent data infrastructure consultancy, Janus Sovereignty Systems. Because of my future memory, I knew exactly which international shipping conglomerates were currently suffering from border delays. I sent out exactly 3 emails to specific procurement directors in Edinburgh and Rotterdam, containing a precompiled, highly efficient version of my Janus routing kernel. Within 48 hours, 2 of those companies signed a master service agreement with my shell firm, securing a monthly recurring revenue stream that was double my entire previous 8-year family salary. I paid my taxes. I made my black tea. I sat by the small log fire and watched the white foam break against the dark rocks below. I left my old mobile phone sitting face down on the edge of the kitchen counter, its logging application running silently in the background, tracking the countdown clock on the Vance Logistics Network cache. For the first 30 days of my life in Scotland, the Vance Logistics Network logs were completely normal. Leo was living his absolute best life, posting pictures on LinkedIn from his new executive office, talking about how his restructured management framework had increased operational throughput by 20%. He didn't understand that the system was simply running on the local cache, the temporary digital memory left behind inside their office computers when I pulled the server blades out of the outbuilding wall. The terminals didn't need to ping my master Zurich server for security tokens yet, because the internal validation counter was still ticking down from 30 days. My mother went to Spain, spending £60,000 on a luxury villa rental to celebrate her retirement from the corporate board. They truly believed that they had successfully extracted all the value from my life, locked me out of the castle, and suffered 0 consequences for it. But in the world of computer science, a cache is not a permanent solution. It is a temporary stay of execution. On October 17th, at exactly 11:42 p.m., the local cache hit 0. The security tokens expired. The computers inside the Vance Logistics headquarters woke up and found themselves completely blind, and the avalanche I had been preparing for 12 years finally began to slide down the mountain. If you want to see the exact minute when the multi-million-dollar corporate machine slams into a brick wall of its own making, make sure you are subscribed to Anonymous Archives right now. Drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done if your own flesh and blood had stripped you of your life's work out of pure greed. Because the phone on Arthur's kitchen counter in Scotland is about to start vibrating, and the voice on the other end is going to sound very, very different this time. On the morning of October 18th, the corporate terminals at Vance Logistics failed to boot. When the logistics clerks clicked their standard Generate Customs Route buttons, the screen didn't display the green clearance certificates. It displayed a flat, gray, systemic dialog box that read, "Security token revoked. License verification failed. Within 6 hours, 72 of our heavy freight trucks carrying high-value, perishable grocery assets were pulled over by the border authorities at the Dover docks and the Calais ferry terminal. Because the automated compliance certificates were completely blank, the port database flagged our entire fleet for urgent as manual customs audits. The entry gates were completely blocked by our trailers, the port authorities throwing massive 40,000-pound-a-day congestion fines onto our account. Leo's head of IT ran into the executive office, his face completely white, his hands shaking as he laid his tablet on Leo's desk. "Sir, the routing software has completely locked us out. It's not a crash. It's a license expiration. The core code isn't hosted on our local drives. It's pinging an encrypted server in Switzerland, and we don't have the master administrative keys," Leo shouted. "What do you mean we don't have the keys? Arthur wrote it. It's our software. Break the code." The IT director swallowed hard, shaking his head. "We can't break it, sir. It's compiled in native C++ with a multi-layered cryptographic shield. If we try to force an administrative bypass, the system wipes its local directory files. We don't even have the documentation." At 2 p.m., my old mobile phone on the kitchen counter in Scotland began to vibrate violently, the screen lighting up with 19 missed calls from the corporate office registry within 40 minutes. I didn't answer the phone until Thursday afternoon, exactly 6 weeks after I had signed the paperwork inside Mr. Abernathy's office. I was sitting by my window, watching the heavy gray waves of the North Sea roll onto the cold, wet sand. When I pressed the green button, I didn't say a word. I simply held the phone to my ear and listened to the silence. My mother's voice came through the speaker, but the texture was entirely wrong. The smooth, superior, theatrical cadence she had used during the will reading was completely gone. She sounded small, frayed, like an old piece of cardboard left out in the rain. Arthur, thank God. You need to come back to Birmingham immediately. Leo is in an absolute state. He hasn't slept in 4 days. The revenue authorities have launched a full forensic audit because our automated tax credit filings stopped 30 days ago. The port officials are threatening to seize 12 of our new freight trailers. We are losing 50,000 pounds a day. I took a slow sip of my black tea, the steam rising in the cold air of my kitchen. I said in my soft, quiet, restricted voice, "Good afternoon, Mother. What seems to be the operational difficulty?" She started crying, a ragged, uncoordinated, messy sound that lacked any sort of her usual social dignity. "Arthur, please don't be cold with me. The company is falling apart from the inside. The client terminals are completely dead. And Arthur, there are 3 court bailiffs standing at our main depot gate right now with concrete barriers." Leo tried to drive one of the delivery trucks through the grass boundary to bypass them, and the police arrested the driver for criminal trespass on protected land. "Why are you doing this to your own family? Arthur, why are you destroying your brother's life?" I looked out the window at the distant, cold, gray horizon. I said, "Mother, I am not doing anything to Leo. I am simply managing my legacy, exactly as you suggested I should." Leo snatched the phone from her hand, his heavy, ragged, uneven breathing rattling through the phone speaker. The arrogant, polished corporate veneer was completely stripped away, leaving nothing but the raw, primal panic of a fraudulent king whose crown was melting. "How much do you want? Arthur, name your number. Just name your fucking number for the software keys and the road easement. We'll buy your stupid acre back for 3 times its market value. We'll give you a 5% non-voting dividend in the company. Just turn the master server back on today. The clients are canceling their contracts. I listened to the steady, cool, rhythmic hum of my server blades spinning in the next room. I said, Leo, you don't have enough liquidity in your entire corporate account to buy this software license. He spat. It's just code. Anyone can write code. I'll hire an elite development agency from London to rewrite your stupid script by next week. I replied, Go ahead. Leo, try it. But it took me 12 years of 15-hour days to map the specific compliance algorithms for those European border grids. Your London agency will take 18 months just to understand the data architecture documentation. And by then, Vance Logistics will have been liquidated by the High Court for non-compliance penalties. You thought you inherited an empire, Leo, but you only inherited the office chairs. I have already sold the exclusive regional rights for the Janus software kernel to a maritime transport corporation in Edinburgh. Their trucks are running on my code right now, flawlessly. Yours are sitting in the mud at Dover. Leo's voice dropped into a desperate, jagged, broken whisper through the line. What about the road? Arthur, you can't block a commercial business access road. It's an illegal disruption of commerce. Our lawyers will sue you. I turned a page in my notebook, looking at the official land registry filings. I said, it would be an illegal disruption if it were an established public right-of-way. Leo. But Father kept that access road classified as a private estate path for 30 years to avoid municipal maintenance taxes. And since you and Mother explicitly severed the northern acre from the corporate holding during the probate hearing, that road junction is now a private parcel under my absolute individual control. I have legally leased the surrounding grid to the Midlands Wildlife Conservation Trust for the next 25 years. They have officially designated that asphalt junction as a protected hedge corridor for local badger populations. No heavy commercial vehicle can pass through that grid without violating a federal environmental order. If you drive another truck onto that asphalt, the Trust's legal team will file for an immediate high court injunction against you personally, carrying automatic prison terms for contempt of court. There was a long, suffocating, heavy silence on the line. The kind of absolute silence that exists when an arrogant system realizes it has run completely out of memory and cannot complete the basic task it was given. My mother took the phone back, her voice shaking so hard I could hear her teeth clicking against the plastic casing. Arthur, please, we're your family. You can't let your father's life work turn to absolute dust. I stood up and walked to the door, looking at the cold stone walls of my cottage. I said, my father's life work was built on my silence. Mother, you told me inside the lawyer's office that it was for the best. You told me Leo had the big picture. I am simply following your instructions. You treat the people who build your foundation like they are invisible. And then you wonder why the roof falls on your head. You were never looking for a family, Mother. You were looking for a free technician, and the contract has expired. I pressed the red button, disconnected the call, and turned off the phone. Vance Logistics went into involuntary administration exactly 4 months later. Without the Janus operating system, the customs backlog grew so massive that their major supermarket clients canceled their contracts within 30 days. The flagship countryside estate was sold at a court auction to cover the unpaid port fines and the massive back taxes. My mother and Leo moved into a small, 2-bedroom rental apartment in East Birmingham, a place where there are no glass balconies and no corporate journals to photograph them for. Sometimes, I look at that dead, 6mm optical fiber cable I kept as a memento on my desk in Scotland, how something so small, so quiet, and so hidden could hold up something so loud and so massive. People think family is about blood, or shared names, or the things we leave behind in expensive lawyer offices. But it isn't. Human relationships are just like data structures. They are networks of mutual dependencies. And if you treat the people who hold up your world like they are worth nothing, you shouldn't be surprised when you find yourself standing in the cold mud, wondering how an entire empire could disappear through a 6mm gap. If you have ever had to let a structure fall to find your own worth, subscribe to Anonymous Archives. We hold the facts, because the truth doesn't need to shout. When a large corporation falls into administration, it doesn't happen silently. It happens with the loud, grinding sound of forensic accountants ripping through old ledger books. In November, exactly 1 year after the day I died in my previous life, a senior investigator from the His Majesty's Revenue and Customs Department arrived at my cottage in Scotland. His name was Mr. Vance, no relation, a sharp, dry man who had spent 30 years hunting corporate fraud. He sat at my kitchen table, looking at the clean, documented files I had laid out for him. I didn't hide anything. I handed him the master copyright registration of Janus Sovereignty Systems, LLC, the Delaware corporate certificates, and the automated logs showing every time Vance Logistics had clicked "I accept" on the terms of service. He looked through the paperwork, a slow, rare smile appearing on his weathered face. "Mr. Vance, your brother Leo has spent the last 3 weeks telling our department that you stole the company's proprietary software. But looking at these records, it appears Vance Logistics was operating an unlicensed software node for 8 years, and then systematically claimed millions of pounds in government technology tax credits for research and development that they never actually performed." I poured him a fresh mug of black tea and said in my quiet voice, "Leo always believed that if you look like you own something, the data doesn't matter." Mr. Vance nodded, closing his folder with a sharp snap. "The data always matters, Mr. Vance. Your brother isn't just looking at bankruptcy. He's looking at a criminal indictment for corporate tax evasion." I stood at the window, watching the winter snow begin to fall over the North Sea. I didn't feel a surge of malicious joy. I just felt the cold, clean satisfaction of a system reaching its final, inevitable state of execution. 2 weeks before Christmas, Mr. Abernathy, the family lawyer, drove all the way from Birmingham to my cottage. He didn't look like the powerful, commanding senior partner who had read my father's will with a smirk. He looked old, his expensive wool coat wet from the Scottish rain, his shoes covered in mud from the cliff path. He stood in my doorway, holding his leather briefcase like a shield, his voice trembling in the cold wind. "Arthur, please, I need 20 minutes of your time. This isn't about Leo. This is about my firm." I stepped back, allowing him to enter the warm kitchen. I didn't offer him tea. I simply stood by the counter, waiting. He sat down heavily, his hands shaking as he opened his briefcase. "Arthur, Leo's legal team is trying to sue my firm for professional negligence. They are claiming I failed to verify the boundary lines of the northern acre before the will was executed. They are saying I allowed your father to sign a catastrophic asset split. If they win, my firm's insurance will be wiped out, and my career is completely finished." I looked down at him, my expression completely flat. "Mr. Abernathy, you verified the boundary lines using the map that my mother and Leo provided to you. You didn't perform a physical survey because Leo told you it was a waste of corporate funds, and you agreed because you wanted to keep his business." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and realization. How do you know that? "Arthur, you weren't even in the room." I pointed at my laptop terminal on the desk. "I am a systems architect, Mr. Abernathy. I track dependencies." You chose to depend on Leo's charm rather than the actual ground data. I signed the papers exactly as you wrote them. I took the mud, and I took the stone room. I followed your law." He buried his face in his hands, letting out a low, broken groan. "Is there any way out? Arthur? Can we buy an easement for the road? Just name a price. Anything to save my firm." I walked to the door and opened it, letting the cold, salty wind rush into the kitchen. "The system has already compiled the output, Mr. Abernathy. You cannot undo the code after it has run." On Christmas Eve, I traveled into Edinburgh to purchase a new set of data storage drives for my expanding network. The city was covered in a thick, beautiful blanket of white snow, the holiday lights reflecting warmly against the historic stone buildings. As I was walking toward the train station, carrying my shopping bag, I saw a familiar figure standing near the entrance. It was Leo. He wasn't wearing his 3,000-pound Italian suit. He was wearing a plain, cheap winter jacket, his hair unkempt, his face thin, pale, and hollowed out by months of legal terror. He was holding a plastic folder, likely on his way to a meeting with a public defender or a liquidation trustee. When our eyes met, he stopped dead in his tracks. For 5 long seconds, the golden boy of the Vance family legacy just stared at me through the falling snow. He didn't shout. He didn't run forward to punch me. He didn't look angry. He just looked entirely and completely, profoundly broken. He walked over to me slowly, his boots crunching on the fresh snow, his voice sounding thin and raspy in the cold air. "Arthur," he whispered. "Artie, why did you go so far? You could have just told me. We could have worked it out." I looked at my identical twin brother, the boy who had stolen my childhood credit, the man who had let me die alone in my past life. I said in my soft, quiet, and restricted voice, "I did try to tell you, Leo. For 12 years. I told you with my work. I told you with my silence. But you were too busy listening to the sound of your own name to hear me." He looked down at the snow, a single bitter tear freezing on his cheek. "We have nothing left. Artie. Mother had to sell her jewelry to pay the initial defense lawyers. We're living in a box in East Birmingham." I stepped past him, my hand gripping the handle of my shopping bag. "Then you are finally living in a world that matches your value, Leo." I walked onto the train platform, without looking back a single time. In January, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived at my cottage. It was written in my mother's elegant, cursive handwriting. But the lines were shaky, uneven, lacking her usual artistic precision. "Arthur, my son," the letter read, "I know you harbor a deep, bitter resentment for the choices your father and I made regarding the family estate. But a mother knows her children. Arthur, I always knew you had a beautiful, brilliant, internal mind. I left you in the outbuilding because I thought you found peace there, away from the superficial noise of the corporate world. Leo is facing 3 years in a federal facility for tax discrepancies he didn't even understand. He is your brother, your twin. If you sign the software release forms, if you withdraw the wildlife lease, the administrators can restructure the asset and save him. Please, Arthur, do not let your family name be dragged through the mud of a criminal court. I am begging you as your mother." I sat by my log fire, reading the letter through twice. She was still doing it. Even now, standing in the ruins of her empire, she was still trying to rewrite history. She was trying to transform 12 years of cold, calculating neglect into a protective, loving choice. She didn't love my brilliant mind. She loved the asset it could save. I took the letter, leaned forward, and dropped it directly into the center of the roaring fire. I watched the cream paper turn black, curling into ash, the elegant cursive words disappearing into the orange flames. When you spend your entire life treating someone like an invisible phantom, you shouldn't be surprised when they disappear completely when you try to hold them. The trial of Leo Vance took place in March, inside a wood-paneled courtroom in central Birmingham. I didn't attend in person. I didn't need to. I watched the public legal feed from my terminal in Scotland. Leo stood in the dock, looking small, his shoulders slumped, his voice barely audible as he entered his plea. His high-priced London defense attorneys tried to argue that he was an innocent victim of a digital systems anomaly, claiming that an anonymous technology firm had maliciously manipulated the company's internal network. But the prosecution, armed with the pristine chronological data trail I had provided to HMRC, systematically destroyed their defense within 2 hours. They showed the court the digital signatures, the tax credit filings, and the specific dates where Leo had approved the operational metrics. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman, looked down at Leo over her desk and said, "Mr. Vance, you spent 8 years collecting accolades, corporate bonuses, and public praise for a digital framework you didn't create and couldn't even explain to this court. You willfully defrauded the public revenue to fund an unsustainable lifestyle. And when the system naturally demanded accountability, you tried to blame the very person who kept your company functional. This court finds your conduct to be a textbook example of corporate arrogance and fraud." Leo was sentenced to 36 months in a minimum security correctional facility. My mother collapsed in the public gallery, her loud, dramatic weeping echoing through the microphone feed. I closed the stream terminal window, stood up, and went out to my balcony to check the weather. The sea was calm, the gray sky finally breaking to reveal a thin, pale line of golden winter sunlight. The calculation was complete. The loop was closed. The system had reached absolute equilibrium. Today, Janus Sovereignty Systems is no longer a small, 2-client consultancy running out of a spare bedroom in Scotland. We occupy a beautifully restored, historic stone warehouse on the Leith docks in Edinburgh, housing 30 of the brightest, most precise systems engineers in the country. We manage the digital infrastructure for 40% of the maritime freight traffic entering the United Kingdom. Our clients don't call me for handshakes or marketing meetings. They call me because our code is absolute, our systems are bulletproof, and our data never lies. I still live in my gray stone cottage on the cliff. I still make my black tea at 5 a.m. every morning, and I still spend my evenings looking out at the endless, deep blue expanse of the North Sea. Sometimes, people ask me why I didn't take my family's money, or why I didn't fight to take over Vance Logistics. I just give them a quiet, slow smile and don't answer. They don't understand that the greatest power you can ever hold over toxic, arrogant people is not the power to defeat them in a loud, messy, public battle. The greatest power is simply walking away, taking your invisible foundation with you, and building an absolute empire of your own in the silence. The universe gave me a second chance, not to save the people who broke me, but to find the ruthless, beautiful courage to stand on my own 2 feet. What would you have done if you were standing in my shoes? If you are ready to build your own foundation, in silence, and with absolute precision, make sure you hit that subscribe button for Anonymous Archives. Stay quiet, stay focused, because the truth never needs to shout. For those who still look at the wreckage of Vance Logistics and wonder if the price was too high, let me show you the final, unredacted entries from the Master System Archive. In the world of enterprise networking, every single interaction leaves an indelible, permanent digital print. After Leo was processed into the correctional grid, I accessed the old company server logs one final time before the liquidation company wiped the hardware. Deep within the automated system reporting directory, I found a hidden file folder created by my father in 2022, labeled Project Sibling Priority. I opened it. Inside was a confidential memorandum he had sent to his personal financial advisor. "Arthur is our structural insurance policy," my father had written. "As long as he remains in the outbuilding writing the core scripts, Leo can scale the market without operational risk. We must ensure Arthur never realizes his market value, because if he leaves, the software replacement cost will liquidate our margins. Keep his salary fixed and ensure his name stays off the intellectual property registry filings." I stared at the text on my screen, the cold rain hitting the window glass of my Edinburgh warehouse. My father hadn't been blind to my value. He hadn't been ignorant or simple-minded or tricked by Leo's corporate charm. He had known exactly how critical I was to his multi-million-pound survival. He had systematically, intentionally, and with total premeditation kept me in the dark, using my quiet loyalty as a free structural insurance policy to enrich his favored son. It was a perfect, corporate, mathematical exploitation of a child's desire for parental validation. I didn't feel a single drop of regret as I pressed the master delete key, watching his final project files dissolve into random, unrecoverable bits of digital noise. Last week, a small, local newspaper in the Midlands published a short notice on page 14. It announced the permanent dissolution of the Vance Logistics corporate brand name and the conversion of the old estate depot into a municipal recycling facility. The grand glass balcony where Leo used to stand in his tailored suits was torn down by a demolition crew to make room for automated sorting bins. My mother now lives in a modest, assisted care community in South Birmingham. Her elegant villa vacations replaced by weekly walks around a concrete courtyard garden. She doesn't write me letters anymore. She knows the firewall is complete. Some people spend their entire lives screaming for justice, demanding that the world see their pain and validate their struggle. But the universe doesn't operate on human noise. The universe is an immense, complex, flawlessly beautiful operating system. It doesn't care about the charm of the king or the tears of the crowd. It simply tracks the inputs, processes the logic, and delivers the exact output that has been earned. If you are currently sitting in your own cold, unheated stone room, watching someone else wear your crown and spend your currency, do not waste your breath shouting into the wind. Work in absolute, perfect, sovereign silence. Build your system, secure your keys, purchase your gate, and let the architecture of reality do the rest of the work for you. Thank you for listening to this record. This is Anonymous Archives, where the facts remain unredacted, and the truth never needs to shout.